My name is André Curtis-Trudel. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Philosophy. At the broadest level, my research is on the topic of computation and science. One of the most striking intellectual developments in the last 50 odd years is the emergence of computation, both as a tool for doing science, but also as an object of scientific inquiry in its own right. My research attempts to understand the emergence of computation and its place in our broader intellectual lives. I have two main research projects on the topic of computation. One is on the nature of computation. The idea that we can explain some systems, for instance, systems like the brain, by conceptualizing them as computers has exerted a pretty powerful influence on 20th century science and cognitive science in particular. But it's not entirely clear what it means to say that something is a computer, especially something like the brain. So this strand of my research draws on insights in computer science and the philosophy of mathematics to try to clarify what a good answer to this question might be. My second main research project focuses on applications of artificial intelligence in science. So here, the starting point is the observation that AI tools are being used all over the place, extremely widely in contemporary science, with pretty striking, remarkable results. According to some scientific commentators, we're even in the midst of what you might think of as an AI revolution in science. But there are lots of risks and trade-offs that this involves and that we need to navigate as we move towards more AI laden and perhaps even AI driven science. And so this strand of my research considers the epistemic trade offs, that is, trade offs with respect to things like scientific evidence and justification that need to be handled as more and more science is taken over by AI. I'm going to mention two, one for each project. For my work on physical computation, probably some foundational work by John von Neumann on the EDVAC, that's an early electronic digital computer, is an invaluable textual document. Not only is it philosophically rich, but it goes into a tremendous amount of detail about the challenges associated with building one of the first digital computers. Now, it's technically, I think, a piece of maybe electrical engineering or computer engineering rather than philosophy per se. But von Neumann is philosophically sensitive, and there are lots of interesting remarks and hints about what physical computation might need to involve that are touched upon in this work, where he's reflecting on his attempt to build a computer, one of the very first. Another important philosophical paper book really isn't even a philosophical paper book. It would be the Archive. That's Archive with an X. This is, for those who don't know, a online open repository of scientific and technical articles on AI and other topics in that area. New papers documenting absolutely fascinating breakthroughs with these technologies are posted every day, multiple times a day in some cases, and many of them are philosophically very rich. Any philosopher of science interested in AI and science should be reading the Archive. And so, again, I haven't really answered the question, but that's probably the one I read the most. Our department values and encourages active engagement with the sciences. And many of our graduate students, in fact, earn terminal MA degrees alongside their PhD in a science that's relevant to their PhD work. This isn't something that you can do in every, PhD program in philosophy in North America. But for philosophers of science, this is an extremely valuable complement to their philosophical work. If you value publicly engaged work, if you value interdisciplinary work, if you value opportunities to engage with scientists alongside or complementing your philosophical work, then UC would be a great place for you because we value and support all of those things. My favorite philosophy class, certainly the one that was most transformative for me in undergraduate, was actually a metaethics class. This was my first introduction, I think, to really rigorous, careful, systematic philosophical thought. And I was impressed by how systematic and comprehensive we could be, even when we're reasoning about something as abstract as metaethics. And while I eventually ended up moving away from metaethics and towards philosophy of science, that initial impression that I got and the importance of careful, systematic, comprehensive thought stayed with me, even as I moved in other directions in my research. I'm not sure I have a favorite philosopher, but if I had to pick, I'd pick someone who is provocative and extremely ambitious. And someone who I think fits that bill would be Richard Rorty. I agree with very, very little of what he says and argues for, but I'm always impressed by the scope of his ambition in his work. And he is really trying, I think, to live up to a kind of goal, as Wilfred Sellers puts it, of figuring out how things, in the broadest sense of the term, hang together in the broadest sense of the term. That's something that I aspire to in my own research as well. My favorite non philosophical activity now that I'm living back in North America is probably baking. I spent a lot of time baking in graduate school and I got away from it during my postdoc, but it's a very low impact and a low barrier to entry kind of hobby with high satisfaction. Plus, as you're waiting for things to bake and rise, there's lots of time to go, away and do things like read philosophy too. I'm not sure I have a staple favorite, but lately I've been returning to Kazuo Ishiguro's work, especially his novels The Remains of the Day and Never Let Me Go. They're philosophically rich and very interesting. And I think Ishiguro, as a writer, has a way of wending his way around a point without making it entirely explicit that is very attractive to someone trained as a philosopher. Our job is to make things as explicit and as straightforward as possible. And it's a nice change of pace reading something that doesn't do that.